Chapter 264. However, under the gaze of these people, Chili seemed to treat them as air. She just took out 2 wrapped gifts from her bag and deliberately stood up. Then she placed one gift in front of the 2 girls. President Chi. Looking at the 2 boxes, Chili's assistant was a little stunned. Others might not know what those 2 gifts were, but she knew very well that those 2 gifts were not cheap. Moreover, they were custom-made. It could be said that in this world there were only these 2 things and there was no third. Originally, the assistant thought that Chili prepared them for her mother. Now, it seemed that they were prepared for the 2 girls. However, at this time, not only the assistant was more confused, but Jiang Hai was also more confused. He really wanted to ask this woman what she meant. Was she trying to trick him? However, it was really difficult for him to ask this question. After all, there were outsiders here. Therefore, he just looked at Delina and Marian. At this time, the 2 girls were also a little confused. They didn't understand what was going on. Why did a mother suddenly appear? They knew about the things between Jiang Hai and Chili in China, but they didn't know the details. Now, it seemed that a mother from China came to find them. Accept it? Although he was a little confused, a little puzzled, and a little unhappy, Jiang Hai still nodded. After all, there were outsiders and children here. Jiang Hai couldn't say too much. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina and Marian also opened the gift boxes in front of them. This was also the difference between foreigners and Chinese people. After Chinese people received the gift, they didn't open it immediately. Instead, they would wait until they went home to open it. In this way, it was hard to say whether the other party had more money or not. After all, people cared about their face. However, people in the United States were more accustomed to opening the gift and then expressing their love. This also gave the giver a chance to show his face in front of others. Of course, if the gift wasn't good, then showing his face would become a disgrace. However, obviously, Chili, who had been in the United States for so long, knew this. In addition, she was very confident in her gift. When the gift boxes were opened, 2 diamond bracelets appeared in front of the 2 girls. Wow, it's so beautiful. These 2 bracelets were obviously designed by a famous designer. It was very likely that it was a limited edition. The base should be platinum, and in the middle of the platinum there should be 10 diamonds. The main diamond is about 1 carat, and the other 9 diamonds are more than 50 cents. This bracelet's diamond alone is worth about $10,000. In addition to the design fee and the platinum, this bracelet is worth about $20,000. This is the most expensive gift. This is a little too expensive. Jiang Hai glanced at the 2 bracelets. Although he didn't know how much they cost, he knew that they definitely wouldn't be cheap since they were so shiny. Therefore, he said to Chili hesitantly, "Is this for you? It's for the children. Since you agreed to accept it, it has nothing to do with you. Don't look at it first. You can look at it when you go back to your room." However, Chili retorted after hearing Jiang Hai's words. When she saw that Jiang Hai was a little speechless, Chili changed her style and instantly became a good wife and mother. She looked at the 2 girls in front of her and said gently. The 2 girls looked at her, looked at each other, and nodded at her. Then they gestured a thank you with their hands and put the gift box away. However, they put it behind their chairs like they treasured it very much. Jiang Hai had always been raising these 2 girls according to the principle of adopted daughters. Although he didn't spoil them, it could be said that he spoiled them very much. Except for sleeping with him, he gave them whatever they wanted. Clothes, toys, TVs, game consoles, computers, mobile phones, iPads, and so on. These 2 girls had everything that other people's children had. Moreover, they were all of the best quality. However, Jiang Hai had never bought such expensive jewelry before. Then let's eat first. Seeing that this matter seemed to be over, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly and asked everyone to start eating. As for the assistant that he hadn't introduced, well, who would care about her? As Jiang Hai moved his knife and fork first, everyone started to eat. Jiang Hai cut the beef. Daliana, Marian, and Selena Gomez each got a piece of fish. Compared to beef, Daliana and Marian preferred to eat fish because they often ate fish when they were homeless. Fish was much cheaper than beef, so they had been used to eating it. As for Selena Gomez, she purely wanted to maintain her figure. Since she came to Prawalton, her target was beef. Naturally, she also cut beef. Chili's assistant's eyes didn't leave the lobsters and abalones when they were on the table. Now that the meal started, she immediately got an abalone to eat. This was a wild abalone that had been raised in cold water for many years. Naturally, its taste was much better than those raised in China. Even compared to those in Australia, it was much better than those in China. Whether it was fish or seafood in cold water, due to the environment they could only grow for a few months in a year. However, they could grow for a year in temperate and tropical areas. Therefore, a fish that lived in temperate or tropical zones for a year would have to live in cold water zones for a few years. The constant stimulation of the cold water made the meat firm and sweet. In terms of taste, the seafood in cold water zones was indeed more delicious than those in temperate or tropical zones. Just like now, although it was the simplest cooking method, the assistant's eyes lit up as soon as she ate it. Compared to her assistant, Chi Li's first goal was to eat the vegetable salad. However, seeing that her assistant was eating so happily, she ate the cheesy lobster instead. The lobster meat had already been torn, and there was a layer of mozzarella cheese on it. The rich taste of cheese had already drifted in the air. This made the assistant, who hadn't even swallowed the abalone, swallow her saliva crazily. Chi Li forked the piece of lobster with cheese and put it into her mouth. Her eyes instantly lit up. Oh, delicious. The lobster's taste was a little like that of shrimp, but it was 100 times firmer and dozens of times more delicious. Its meat was fresh and tough. If one used their teeth to tear it, it would be a little troublesome. The cooked lobster already tasted pretty good. Now there was cheese on top. It didn't destroy the original taste of the lobster. Instead, it made the lobster, which was originally fresh, tough, and thick, had an even stronger taste of cheese and milk. It really made people salivate just by looking at it. This lobster is really good, but compared to Jiang Hai's steak, it's a far cry. Looking at the two people eating with grease dripping from their mouths, Selena Gomez also took a small bite and said with a smile, "Oh." Hearing her words, the two people, who were still fighting over the abalone and lobster, looked at the steak in front of them with some confusion. To be honest, they had already seen the steak at the first moment. But the appearance of the steak, Jiang Hai didn't care about that when cooking. Because it was almost fully cooked, there was inevitably a layer of slightly charred black on top of the steak. Coupled with the black pepper sauce, it could be said that a piece of charcoal was beautified and placed there to deceive a lot of people. Compared to steak, seafood looked much better. Wuxia food was particular about color, fragrance, and taste. The first was color. If the food wasn't good looking, how could they eat it? Originally, if Selena Gomez was the only one talking, the two people would hesitate for a moment. However, when Chi Li saw that Prawalton was about to finish the steak in the distance, she knew that there must be something behind the steak. Otherwise, that woman wouldn't be so interested in it. She temporarily put down the other food in her hand and looked at Jiang Hai's steak. She picked up the knife and fork and cut a piece of it. As Chi Li put the steak in her mouth and bit it, the thick lean meat wrapped in the marbled texture and the melted fat inside the steak instantly gushed out of her mouth. The beef was firm, fresh, and tender, and it constantly attacked her taste buds and teeth. Once she took a bite of this kind of steak, it was almost impossible to stop her mouth from eating it. Her eyes gradually became a little blurred. In a daze, she seemed to have returned to more than 10 years ago. She still remembered that her whole family went to the capital with her father. Because at that time, her father brought back a girl, which made Chi Li extremely dissatisfied with her father. In order to please his eldest daughter, Chi Li's father took her to Japan for a trip. In Hyogo County, his father invited her to eat the beef there once. The taste of the beef was exactly the same as the beef she ate today. This is 5A grade beef? Looking at the almost charred beef in front of her, Chi Li was full of disbelief. Almost to be exact, it should be specially selected grade beef. After all, we are not in Japan, but I believe the quality should not be worse than the Japanese. Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He is quite confident in his beef. At this time, Prawalton also finished the steak. I think it's time for us to talk about our cooperation. As she put down the knife and fork, she also said to Jiang Hai seriously. Chapter 265. Oh, I'm all ears. To be honest, Jiang Hai had been waiting for her to talk about this for a long time. In fact, in Jiang Hai's opinion, these women were a little redundant. What's the point of having fun? It's better to just do what Mr. Zhang did. How many cows are directly ordered, how much meat is on those cows, how much is slaughtered, how much is exchanged, and that's it. Prawalton still has to come to see and play, isn't it troublesome? But now, after all, it's a buyer's market. Although Jiang Hai can easily sell these cows, most places like Western restaurants can't accept more than 10,000 cows from Jiang Hai, although Jiang Hai's name has become famous this time. But it's only in New York. No one in the United States or Western United States knows who he is. So if Jiang Hai doesn't want to sell to the middleman at a low price, and he also wants to save trouble, this Prawalton must be caught. Your beef here, to be honest, is better than I expected. If the full score of beef is 100 points, your beef can be 95 points, but now it's only 80 points. The 15 points deducted is because your chef is too bad. If I were you, I would have fired the chef. Raising his index finger, Prawalton said with a serious face. Although she is a bit chinibu, sometimes she doesn't go to work, but when it comes to business she won't joke. Oh, the beef is made by myself. In fact, if a chef really makes a dish like this, in fact, even if Prawalton doesn't say it, Jiang Hai will fire him, but he made it himself, so there is no way to fire him. I already thought about it. Now let's talk about the truth. I haven't carefully looked at the ranch in your manor. I don't know what secret recipes you have, and I'm not interested in knowing. If I want to buy the whole cow you won't agree, so let's calculate according to the slaughtered cow. After the cow is slaughtered, how much is the meat of each grade? Let's talk about it first. In fact, according to the working principle of Americans, they don't talk about business when eating, so naturally they don't talk about business. Eating is eating and there is nothing else mixed in, but Prawalton knows that Jiang Hai is a Wuxia. As a Wuxia who has been in the United States for half a year, it is difficult for him to change the habits of Wuxia. Talking business at the dinner table is also one of the characteristics of Wuxia, so she can cater to his interests. If you can guarantee the quality of your beef cattle here, I can buy all your beef cattle. I think you are in this line of work, you should also know the current market price very well. The average premium grade beef is $375 per pound, the special grade beef is $130 per pound, the best grade beef is $50 per pound, the standard and commercial grade beef is useless to me, but I can also take it. After all, we still have places that sell beef normally in Walmart. The price I give you, you can consider it. I will give you a higher price for the premium grade beef, $380 per pound, the special grade beef is $140 per pound, the best grade beef is $55 per pound, the standard and commercial grade beef is according to the market price. I think you also understand that there is no profit in this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton casually quoted the price. After listening to her words, Jiang Hai also calculated in his heart. Although his beef cattle will not be as bugged as in the competition, But after these days of farming, he had earned a certain commission for the quality of his beef cattle. According to this price, he could sell one beef cattle for about $120,000 before tax. If he took all the rest, apart from the $2,000 that he had to give to Mr. Zhang, there would still be more than $11,000 left, which would be worth more than $2 billion. This was a big deal. To be honest, Jiang Hai was a little tempted. Wait a minute, the price you said is the price after you want to buy out our beef? But before Jiang Hai agreed, Chili had recovered from the shock and looked at Prawalton seriously. Of course, seeing Chili looking at her, Prawalton narrowed her eyes and said lightly, I don't think this is a very reasonable price. Chili listened to her words and shook her head. Oh, what's not reasonable? Seeing Chili directly say that it is not reasonable, Prawalton was a little surprised. I can't deny that you want to reserve the rest of the beef. Let's not talk about the price of the beef. Let's not talk about the special selection, the best selection, the standard and the commercial price. The price of the special quality beef is a bit inappropriate. Taking a look at Prawalton, Keely's mind spun rapidly. After all, not long ago she also lived in the United States for a few years, so she has some understanding of the price of beef. As a rich second generation in China, especially a woman, she knows how cheap beef is in the United States, and how expensive top-grade beef is. Compared with most people in China who don't know about the grading of beef, Chili at least knows a little about it, although she doesn't know much about it. In general, the special quality beef in the United States is equal to the 4A and 5A grade beef in Japan. But the price of 4A and 5A grade beef is different in Japan. Now Prawalton directly fixed the price, which is obviously to make Jiang Hai confused. Maybe some people will say that it is actually good to fix the price like this because after all, there is beef better than this standard and there is beef worse than this standard. But don't forget there must be a ratio between the two, and the good beef should be much less than the bad beef. For example, Jiang Hai's beef, the retail price of a special grade beef is more than $375. Even in New York and other places with higher sales costs, it can reach more than $400. Especially good grade 5A beef can even be sold for $420, $430 or more. The price difference between these is not just a few pieces of meat. She doesn't know much about beef, but she is after all a businesswoman. She feels that the price above must be fluctuating. If that's the case, what's the price? Hearing Chi Li's words, Prawalton gently tapped Jiang Hai's long oak table with her hand and looked at Chi Li with a playful look. We still need to discuss this. Didn't you come here to have fun? Then you don't need to be in a hurry. Chi Li knows that at this time, it is not a good thing to reveal the bottom price. Moreover, she doesn't know much about this manor. In the principle of not letting Jiang Hai suffer losses in front of her, she still said very indifferently, "Well, I didn't expect Jiang Hai to be a henpecked man." Looking at Qi Li's domineering look, Prawalton is not in a hurry. Originally she just gave a tentative price. She really came here to have fun. But she also came here to discuss business. Compared with those who do anything to make money, she is more polite. At least the price she offered is not too outrageous, but since she was seen through by others, she doesn't care. She is not an ordinary businesswoman with a small pattern. She is Prawalton, the person in charge of Sam's Club of the Walmart family. In fact, Qi Li's skill is still far from hers, but she is very interested and continues to watch. Oh. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai really doesn't know how to respond. After all, there is no need to make the matter between him and Qi Li known to everyone, so at this time, it is better for him to remain silent. "Well, after dinner, is there anything else?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said with a smile. As if the woman who just returned to the Ice Queen has nothing to do with the woman in front of him. He had to admit that the speed at which this woman changed her face really made Jiang Hai dumbfounded. "Oh no." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said to her very clearly. Hearing Jiang Hai's direct words, Prawalton didn't care. She said hello to the others, especially to Selena Gomez, and then went upstairs. Looking at her appearance, Selena Gomez smiled awkwardly. She is such a person. She is actually a little embarrassed to come with her, but sometimes she can't say it. "Well, she is full, but I am not full yet." Everyone continue. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the table that had been paused at this time became lively again. Of course, the main reason is that there is Qi Li's assistant. This girl was really a foodie. Although she was using a fork, which was not her best weapon, she was still invincible on the dining table. Especially after knowing that the steaks were delicious, her fork danced even faster. It is hard to understand how the food is in her stomach. I have to admit that this girl is actually good looking and has a good figure, but eating like this doesn't seem like it. All in all, the meal is still very harmonious. Except for some small mistakes, everything else is within Jiang Hai's expectations. After the meal, Qi Li touched her belly that is already a little round. She took her assistant back to the room, and Selena Gomez also went back to her room. Daliana and Marian also helped Jiang Hai to tidy up and went back to their room to look at the bracelet. Although they didn't say it, it is obvious that they really liked the gift Qi Li gave them this time. This is also what gives Jiang Hai the most headache. After all, in his opinion, he and Qi Li didn't seem to have reached this point. After tidying up the dinner, Jiang Hai returned to his room and threw his body on the big bed. Then he rubbed Goldie's head that was not released because there are guests at night. He looked at the ceiling. He has a feeling that this time, Qi Li is very likely to come to talk to him about the matter between them. And according to the fact that she flew so far, it is impossible for her to cut him in half as he wishes. He is afraid that there will be more problems. Chapter 266. Tap 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 tap. The sound of high heels hitting the wooden floor echoed in Jiang Hai's villa. For this sound, whether it was before or now, the people and beasts in Jiang Hai's villa were not used to it. The people who heard this sound were fine, they might not care, but Goldie and Xiaobai woke up immediately. Feeling the reaction of these two dogs, Jiang Hai also sat up from his sleep. It's not that he remembered, but after all, the incident a while ago didn't happen too long ago. Jiang Hai has to be careful now. After waking up, Jiang Hai took a look at the time. It was only 10:30 in the evening. Although it was completely dark outside, it didn't seem to be the time to sleep. Just now, Jiang Hai was lying in bed thinking about Qi Li and unknowingly fell asleep. As for the TV, it was turned off. Needless to say, Jiang Hai knew that it was Goldie who did it. Now their IQ is no worse than the children at home. Seeing that Jiang Hai fell asleep and turned off the TV, it's not a problem for them. Sometimes they even help Jiang Hai with the quilt and so on. Of course, that's in winter. With the current temperature, Jiang Hai won't catch a cold even if he doesn't cover himself with the quilt at night. What's the situation? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai was also a little confused. He listened carefully and there was indeed the sound of high heels. Knock knock knock. Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, a light knock came from outside the door. Who is it? Although a little curious, Jiang Hai still got up from the bed and asked while walking forward. It's me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's clear voice also came from outside the door. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's footsteps couldn't help but stop, but he still walked to the door and opened it. Then a neatly dressed Qi Li appeared in front of him. Oh, it's so late, what's the matter? Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. He just fell asleep. You haven't slept yet? If you haven't slept, accompany me for a walk. Although Jiang Hai's words were somewhat puzzled and complaining, Qili didn't seem to hear the meaning of Jiang Hai's words. She still looked at Jiang Hai indifferently and said softly, "So late?" Looking at the sky outside, although it's 10:30 for people in the city, nightlife has just begun, but in Winthrop, to be exact, Jiang's manor, it's already late at night. "You don't want me to stand here all the time, then let's go." But Qili didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to refuse. Instead she stood there and said to Jiang Hai. Although he was still a little sleepy, Jiang Hai also knew that he really needed to have a good talk with Qili, so after hesitating for a moment he nodded and closed the door. After about 2 or 3 minutes, when the door opened again, Jiang Hai had already put on his clothes. The two left Jiang Hai's villa one after the other. They walked along the street lamp area set up by Jiang Hai in the manor and slowly walked towards the beach. One had to admit that the night view of Jiang Hai's manor was actually very good. Because the air was not polluted, walking on the manor's road, one could see the sky full of stars, listen to the sound of the wind, and listen to the sound of the waves being rolled up and slapped on the beach. The street lamps weren't very bright, and the hazy feeling made people feel like they were in a fairy tale world. On the lawn in the distance, groups of fireflies were flying around in the grass, giving people a quiet and comfortable feeling. Jiang Hai and Qili walked side by side here, but one walked on the leftmost side of the road, and the other walked on the rightmost side of the road. The two's pace and breath were almost the same, but there was no trace of the intention to interact. Although such a scenery was beautiful, Jiang Hai was used to it, so now he just yawned and walked forward in a daze. Qili seemed to pay more attention to the scenery she saw along the way. Unknowingly, the two had been walking for more than 10 minutes. The lights in the distant villa were almost too far to see clearly. Jiang Hai gradually calmed down under the blow of the cold wind. Wiping his face, Jiang Hai asked Qili, "You called me out, what's the matter? Don't tell me you just want to find someone to accompany you to see the night view." "This is one of them, but I called you out because I have something to tell you. But let's make it clear first, no matter what we talk about later, you must not be angry." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili still looked up at the sky and said indifferently, "Okay." Jiang Hai also understands that some things can't be solved by anger. Since she wants to talk, Jiang Hai won't easily lose his temper. The reason why he was so angry last time was because he felt that he was played. But this time it's in my territory. "Want to play with me? How can it be so easy? Let me ask first, did I do anything wrong to you?" Hearing Jiang Hai agree, Qili's footsteps stopped. Since walking out of the villa, she faced Jiang Hai for the first time. A pair of big eyes just stood there, staring at Jiang Hai and said word by word. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's footsteps couldn't help but stop. No. Thinking about it carefully, although he had a hard time in the previous year, but to be exact, from the beginning, the other party had already made her intentions clear. She and Jiang Hai are not people of the same world. If from the beginning Jiang Hai didn't consider the relationship between husband and wife and didn't want to be a toad eating swan meat, he might not be so disappointed. Of course, this is also a bit absolute. Relationship matters are not like business. It's not so back and forth. If it's really like business, then it's fine. Chapter 267. The sea breeze blew through Jiang Hai's manor with a faint fishy smell and the smell of green grass. On the path inside the manor, Jiang Hai and Qili stood there looking at each other. When Jiang Hai heard Qili's words, his eyes widened unconsciously. His mouth opened so wide that a fist could be stuffed in. He really didn't expect Qili to say that. What does she mean by that? Doesn't she know that I will misunderstand? Cough, I must be thinking too much. She definitely didn't mean that. Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to hide his shocked expression. Then he whispered in his heart, but his eyes unconsciously looked at Qili. Tonight, Qili was dressed very formally, just like her usual style. She wore a slim-fit woman's suit with a corset waist. It seemed to be a brand, but Jiang Hai didn't know. Inside, she wore a white woman's blouse with flowers. She was wearing a short striped checkered skirt. Of course, this was just for show. She also had a pair of tight-fitting leather pants. Below the leather pants was a pair of women's black high-heeled boots. She looked fashionable but also had a sense of strictness. Whether you believe it or not, at the beginning, I really didn't mean to give up on you. Although, as you said, the main purpose of marrying you is to stabilize the Qi family, at least I didn't think of having a second marriage. You are my husband, that's all. Not knowing whether it was because of Jiang Hai's expression or because Qili was a little surprised by what she said, she immediately turned around and walked forward as if she wanted to explain what she had just said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also turned around and continued to walk with her. But this time he didn't walk side by side with her. Instead, he deliberately walked half a step behind because Jiang Hai suddenly didn't know how to face her. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't refuse a woman who came to him. After all, he wasn't a good person. However, he had to be careful when it came to Qi. His sixth sense, well, in fact, it was all senses. He could clearly feel that he was no match for her. It would never be wrong to be careful. Qi didn't look at Jiang Hai at this time and just slowly said her original thoughts. When I married you, I did have some resistance, but it wasn't because of you. It was mainly because my heart was filled with hatred. So, the day after the wedding, I returned to the capital. I wanted to consolidate the Qi family. The Qi family can't be destroyed in my hands. I want revenge. If I let the Yin family know that the Qi family won't be destroyed. Whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai didn't know, so he couldn't interrupt and just continued to walk with her. I'm not a woman who likes to take credit, but there are some things that I feel it's better to make clear to you. I may have forgotten you, but I've never given up on you, nor have I let you down. In fact, when I called you for the first time, I was also prepared to ask you to come to the capital. Of course, it's not that I'm really unwanted to the extent that I have to find you to repay you with my body. I'm going to give you a chance to prove yourself. If you prove yourself, we may be the most compatible people in the world. Even if you can't prove yourself, I'm not going to divorce you. To be exact, no matter how bad it is, it will just drag on. In my heart, I've never had the slightest thought of betraying you. Qi walked in front and kept talking about her true thoughts. Some of these words were good, some were bad, and some were harsh to Jiang Hai's ears. However, he felt that these words should be true because even if she wanted to deceive people, she couldn't deceive people completely. Only when it was 30% false and 70% true could she deceive people. Jiang Hai didn't know whether Qi was telling the truth or not, but Jiang Hai was willing to listen to her. I don't understand why. I don't understand. Even if you're rich now and don't want to be by my side anymore, don't want me to give you another chance and don't want to rely on me like this anymore, I don't seem to have any restrictions on you. When we were in Ice City, I saw you in that situation and I didn't say anything. In the US, let's not talk about you staying obediently. Let's not talk about Prawalton, Selena Gomez and your 2 daughters. Just the 8 girls in the manor, they have good figures, ages, height and looks. Let's not talk about you not having any relationship with them. Maybe you don't have any feelings for them, but they have feelings for you. Forget it, it's meaningless to talk about this. It's your business. However, as she spoke, Qi words became a little sour. Hearing Qi words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little stunned. Was this really Qi, that strong woman? Could it be that she was pretending? It's useless to talk about this. I came here this time to relax. Recently the air in China isn't very good, so I came here to recuperate. Secondly, and most importantly, I feel that we should sort out our relationship. At this point, Qi looked at Jiang Hai very seriously. Since you don't want me to give you a chance to change your mind, I don't want you to change your mind. Since you don't need me to give you a chance now and you don't want to change your mind, then let's think of a compromise. I'm not ready for a divorce yet. Moreover, domestic affairs are not as simple as you think. The waters are murky. The title of a married woman is still useful to me. At least when I go to negotiate some contracts, those people who make things difficult for me will be much less difficult. Therefore, I won't divorce you, but you can rest assured that I have no intention of taking your manor and your money. After I go back, I will ask a lawyer to write a certificate. In the future, I won't take a single cent of your money. Jiang Hai didn't think about the disdain he had received in the past and the suffering of being alone in an empty room. Although now it seemed that even if she wanted to come over and recommend herself, Jiang Hai still had to reconsider. However, if she really didn't want to divorce him, no matter what the reason was, Jiang Hai really didn't want to be too ruthless. Phew, I didn't expect you to be so considerate. Thank you very much. I originally thought that I might have to pay some price. Although Jiang Hai didn't say it clearly, Qi had already understood. She turned her head and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. The strong and serious expression on her face was like winter snow at this time. This was the first time Jiang Hai saw Qi smiling face since she was a child. Under the fireflies, starlight, moonlight, and hazy street lights, it was really beautiful. What do you want to pay? What can you pay? Looking at her, Jiang Hai asked subconsciously. But when he asked, he regretted it a little. This sentence was obviously a little flirtatious. Sure enough, Qi didn't answer, but snorted softly and walked quickly toward the road ahead. But at this moment, a low whimper came into Jiang Hai's ears. However, Jiang Hai hugged her quickly, but he threw her even faster. Before she could react, Jiang Hai had already hugged her and spun her around in a circle, then threw her behind him. Then there was a bang sound and Qi Li's butt and the hard ground had an intimate contact, making her frown and grimace in pain. Just as she was about to ask Jiang Hai what was wrong with him, she saw a ferocious beast slowly walking out of the bushes. This beast looks like a lioness, but it looks slightly smaller than a lion. Under the hazy street lights, it looks very beautiful, but at the same time, it is also very hazy, but because of the night vision, its eyes are green, and the sharp and long canine teeth in its mouth means that it is definitely not a good thing. Jiang Hai is also standing here at this time, staring at it. Sure enough, it's this thing. Looking at his opponent, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, his body unconsciously arched, and his hands vigorously spread out, trying to make himself look bigger. This looked ridiculous to humans, but in nature it was very useful. Making oneself look bigger was the only way to survive in nature. Jiang Hai didn't learn this, but it was as if he was born with it in his mind. He felt that it might be related to the tattoos on his body. Sure enough, seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the mountain lion, which was originally testing the waters, couldn't help but stop and look at Jiang Hai with some vigilance. Jiang Hai also looked at it with vigilance. The man and the beast looked at each other like this, looking for any opportunity to destroy. When the man and the beast stood still, Jiang Hai also put his hand in his mouth, and a clear whistle came out of his mouth. Hearing this whistle, the mountain lion opposite him was stunned, but when it heard the sound coming from the villa area in the distance, it knew that the human in front of it was calling for an accomplice, which made the mountain lion extremely angry. At that moment it couldn't care less. Its body naturally crouched down, its hind legs kicked, opened its bloody mouth and bit at Jiang Hai. Unfortunately, this guy chose the wrong opponent. Jiang Hai looked at the mountain lion pouncing on him. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. The first thing he did was to let go of his head. The mountain lion's pounce was very clever. It was equivalent to 3 strikes. The first was to use its body to knock the opponent down. If it didn't knock the opponent down, the second was to use its claws to firmly nail the opponent's flesh. If the claws were pulled out, there would be a bloody hole. This was to injure the opponent and also to stabilize its body. If the claws were fixed, the third move would be to bite. It wouldn't bite other places but the throat and kill in one blow. The speed and explosive power of a mountain lion were naturally faster than that of a human. Even if a person's reaction speed was extremely fast, it wouldn't be easy to dodge the pouncing attack of a mountain lion if it hadn't reached the limit. In other words, it was at the level of professional training. However, Jiang Hai wasn't an ordinary person after all. If he hadn't leveled up and encountered this mountain lion, he might have been able to dodge, but it was inevitable that he would be scratched and be at a disadvantage. However, now that his physical fitness was twice that of an ordinary person's, Jiang Hai could react. His brain could react, give orders, and his body could follow. His explosive power wasn't weaker than this lion's. Jiang Hai instantly dodged the pouncing attack of the lion and directly dived under the lion's stomach. Then Jiang Hai directly punched the mountain lion's stomach with a rising dragon punch, causing the mountain lion to lose its balance in midair. Its body turned and fell heavily to the side. However, if a mountain lion was so easy to deal with, it wouldn't be a mountain lion. After landing, it scratched twice with its claws and was about to stand up and fight again. However, Jiang Hai wouldn't give it a chance to fight again. Just now Jiang Hai tested it. Compared to this mountain lion, his physical fitness was twice that of a human's. There were advantages and disadvantages. In terms of strength, he naturally had the advantage. However, in terms of agility, explosive power, and speed, although he had some advantages, the advantages weren't very obvious. If he continued fighting like this, he could win, but he couldn't avoid being scratched and scratched. After all, he wasn't carrying a weapon at this time, so taking advantage of its weakness and killing it was a very important strategy. When animals were at their weakest, that was when they lost their balance. Therefore, before the mountain lion could get up, Jiang Hai had already pounced on its body. His legs instantly clamped on its stomach, and his hands wrapped around its neck. He kept exerting force trying to subdue this guy. However, Jiang Hai had underestimated it. Although Jiang Hai was holding it in place, the mountain lion was still struggling and rolling on the ground. It wanted to throw Jiang Hai off, so much so that Jiang Hai's hands, which were wrapped around its neck, couldn't exert any strength. Looking at the dust flying in front of her, Qi Li was completely dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say. Her eyes were filled with the scene of the battle between Jiang Hai and the mountain lion. She never thought that Jiang Hai would be so strong. Suddenly, she realized that she didn't seem to know much about Jiang Hai. He knew how to raise cows and fish, and he had the ability to get the Walton family to come over and talk about cooperation with him. He could fight with such a lion bare-handed. At least, she didn't even dare to think about such a thing in the past. Unknowingly, she had started to care about Jiang Hai because her toy had been stolen. Unknowingly, she felt that Jiang Hai had slowly walked into her heart. Just as she was in a daze, two figures suddenly flew past her. It was because of these two figures that she came back to her senses. When she looked at the center of the field, she saw that the two huge dogs she had seen outside Jiang Hai's room had already joined the battle. These two big dogs, any one of them is actually not smaller than the lion over there. In a one-on-one fight, the lion may not be a match, let alone a group of them. Moreover, there is Jiang Hai on his back. He wanted to scare off the two dogs here. However, just as it bared its teeth, the big gray wolf, Goldie, had already slapped it hard on the head. Goldie's sharp claws instantly opened 3 wounds on its face. Blood was already flowing out, and its flesh was also torn open. As for the big black dog, Xiao Bai, it rushed to the mountain lion's hind leg and bit it. Fortunately, the mountain lion was very smart. At the critical moment, it swept its tail and didn't directly bite the leg bone. Otherwise, with Xiao Bai's bite force, it would be crippled in the future. Even so, when Xiao Bai raised its head, it still took a big piece of meat from its thigh. A dog that bites doesn't bark, and a dog that barks doesn't bite. Although this sentence wasn't absolute, it seemed to make some sense now. Roar, roar. The pain and deterrence caused by the two dogs made the mountain lion panic and roar loudly. Chapter 269. Opportunity. However, its cry was an opportunity for Jiang Hai, who had been behind it the whole time. Jiang Hai's eyes lit up and he exerted force with both hands. This time, the mountain lion did not have time to resist. It was firmly pressed under Jiang Hai's body. Feeling the power from Jiang Hai and the two vicious dogs beside it, the mountain lion, which had little strength left, surrendered this time. Other than gasping for breath, it did not move anymore. At this time, Robbins, Bell, Edward Anderson, and all the men in Jiang Hai's manor ran over with guns and cannons. Even Prawalton, Selena Gomez and Chi Li's assistant, who had not come out yet, ran over. Especially the assistant, she was obviously frightened at this time. After all, for Prawalton and the others, guns were not prohibited in the United States. They were very calm when they saw guns. There must be something in the manor that required guns. Otherwise, it would be impossible to mobilize so many people. However, Chi Li's assistant had never seen such a scene. She even suspected that a war was about to break out. However, when she came over and found her general manager sitting on the ground, she immediately rushed over and helped her up. Following Chi Li's gaze, she saw a lion lying on the ground at this time. Jiang Hai and the two dogs surrounded the lion in the middle. For some reason, she suddenly felt that the lion was a little pitiful. It's a cougar. A cougar actually entered the manor. Seeing the animal under Jiang Hai, the people here could not help but feel a little surprised. Especially Belle and Marin Rupert, their faces were a little ugly. After all, they were responsible for patrolling the border. It was their responsibility to steal fish, and it was also their responsibility to invade from land. In the past, there were no helicopters, so there was no way to patrol so many times. But now that there are helicopters, they actually missed something. This is unacceptable for them. Hurry up and get a cage and put it in. Seeing that everyone was a little hesitant, Jiang Hai ordered loudly. Boss, this guy invaded our manor. Let's just kill it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle's tone carried a trace of anger. A mountain lion entered the manor, this was his responsibility. Now he just wanted to kill this guy to remind himself and vent his anger at the same time. Don't kill it first. I remember that this thing should be a protected animal. Let's catch it first. After thinking about it for a while, Jiang Hai decided that killing this guy was quite tempting. Not only could he taste the mountain lion meat, but he could also get a body of mountain lion skin. However, considering that the population of these guys wasn't very developed, and that he had to do business recently, he decided to do a good deed. So, Jiang Hai decided to pack it up first and think about it later. Hearing that Jiang Hai has already spoken, Belle and Robbins had to return to the manor and bring a cage that Jiang Hai used to store Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang. It's unknown whether this mountain lion is really weak or it has already admitted defeat. After Jiang Hai left, it did not struggle too much. Instead, it was really carried into the cage by Jiang Hai and others. What do we do next? Robbins asked in a low voice as he looked at the mountain lion lying there alone after entering the cage. Feed it something, then I'll call the police station and ask. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai patted the soil on his body and said to Robbins. Then he took out his phone from his pocket and called the police station. The police station was also surprised after learning that Jiang Hai caught a mountain lion alive, but according to the police station, this matter was actually not under their jurisdiction. If the mountain lion broke into the homestay and killed it, it was under their jurisdiction. But now that it has been caught, it was under the jurisdiction of the Wildlife Conservation Center. However, Winthrop is not a big town after all. Therefore, the Wildlife Conservation Center was actually located together with the Stray Pet Center. At this time the center was already closed. Since Jiang Hai had already caught this thing, he would have to trouble him to send this thing to the town tomorrow. Hearing the police's words, Jiang Hai didn't care. After saying a few words he hung up the phone. Then, everyone worked together and carried the mountain lion into Jiang Hai's villa. Then Jiang Hai drove everyone back. It was late at night and everyone was tired after coming out. It was better to go back and rest early. As for the sisters in Jiang Hai's villa, they were also driven back to sleep by Jiang Hai. Prawalton and Selena Gomez didn't need Jiang Hai to tell them to go upstairs to sleep. Only Chi Li and her assistant stayed here. "What can I do for you?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was squatting in front of the cage and still observing the animal, Chi Li hesitated and asked Jiang Hai. But when she asked, her face was a little red. "It's okay, didn't we finish talking about our business? You go back to sleep, it's okay." However, Jiang Hai was clearly a person who didn't understand a girl's thoughts, so he just waved his hand and continued to stare at the mountain lion. "Oh, I see, okay then." Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to want her help, Chi Li couldn't help but stroke her hair a little disappointedly, then went upstairs with her assistant. But at this time, Jiang Hai didn't consider Chi Li's thoughts at all. His eyes were staring at the mountain lion. And the mountain lion was also staring at him. He had to admit that sometimes beasts had much better intuition than humans. Although it dared to confront Jiang Hai just now, at this time the mountain lion was much more obedient. It just stayed there and looked at Jiang Hai cautiously. "I didn't expect that the hero saving the damsel in distress that I originally despised and thought was the most melodramatic was actually quite romantic when it was performed. If Jiang Hai hadn't made her fall, if Jiang Hai had asked her to stay with him on the first floor, if Jiang Hai had raised his head and gently said, 'Are you all right?' After subduing the mountain lion, Jiang Hai had raised his head and gently said, 'Are you all right?' That was such a pleasant thing to do. But unfortunately, none of these happened. But for Chi Li, even if none of these happened, tonight was already perfect. However, while she was happily sleeping, some people couldn't fall asleep. Bang! A glass bottle fell to the marble floor. And Zhang Wu, who had been trying to win back Chi Li, was now drunk in his living room, and in front of him in the dining room, there were several photos of Chi Li and her assistant getting off the plane in Boston, photos of Chi Li and her assistant going to Jiang Hai's manor, and so on. Although there were no photos in the manor, it was obvious that a mature and beautiful woman took the initiative to throw herself into the arms of her nominal husband. There was no need to explain what would happen next. Chapter 270. I'm really grateful for your contribution to nature. This mountain lion is already pregnant. It probably felt the lack of resources in the mountains and the pressure of life was too great, so it entered human society. Looking at the mountain lion in the cage in front of her, the girl standing beside Jiang Hai spoke softly to Jiang Hai with a face full of affection. Last night, Jiang Hai looked at the mountain lion until past midnight before he lost his curiosity and went back to his room to sleep. After waking up this morning, the mountain lion had almost recovered. The recovery ability of wild animals was much stronger than that of domesticated animals, and this mountain lion was the same. After a night of recovery, in addition to water, food, and heating, the wound on the mountain lion's face caused by Xiao Bai had already formed a scar, and the piece of meat on its hind leg that was bitten off by Xiao Bai had also improved a little. Although Jiang Hai did not inject spirit energy into it, the beef in Jiang Hai's manor was nourished by a certain amount of spirit energy after all. Therefore, after the mountain lion ate the meat, its body improved a lot. Early this morning he drove the mountain lion to the Stray Pet Center in Winthrop with Robbins. This mountain lion would stay here for a while, and then Boston would send someone to bring it back to Boston or release it back to the Alabama mountains. With the current protection of the Alabama mountains in the United States, the chances of sending it back were higher than keeping it. Moreover, this mountain lion was an expectant mother at this time. Today was the best opportunity to restore the ecological balance. This is nothing. Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai smiled and waved his hand. In fact, he had always liked ferocious beasts. In the past he did not have the opportunity to raise them, but now, it was not easy to raise them. This may seem nothing to you, but it maintains the ecological balance. Hearing Jiang Hai's nonchalant words, the girl also smiled. This was not the first time this girl and Jiang Hai had met. When Jiang Hai had come to adopt a dog, this girl had also received him. She and Jiang Hai could be considered acquaintances, but Jiang Hai still did not know her name. Listening to her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand up and look at the girl beside him. This girl is a typical American girl about 1.7 meters tall. She doesn't look very old, has long blonde hair, and some small freckles on her face. She is very cute. Looking at the girl's eyes, Jiang Hai chuckled and slowly said, "If you really want to thank me then, let me adopt that brown bear." At first, when she heard the first half of Jiang Hai's sentence, the girl thought that Jiang Hai was asking her out. However, when she heard the second half of the sentence, the girl was stunned. "Get out." Very straightforward words were said to Jiang Hai. The parade would start from the town and end at the seaside. In the middle, there would be residents of the town joining in, making the whole scene very lively. When they arrived at the seaside and presented the sea god's gift, the ceremony would be considered complete. At this time, people would spontaneously organize a small market by the seaside. They could go there to exchange for some old appliances or other things that they needed. You could use money to buy or exchange things. In short, it was a flea market. After hearing Robin's introduction, Jiang Hai, who originally wanted to go back, was not in a hurry. He called back and asked Prawalton, Selena Gomez, and Chile if they wanted to come. After knowing that they were not interested, Jiang Hai went by himself. It was understandable. If he asked these women if they wanted to go to the department stores in Boston to shop for luxury goods, they would definitely be interested. But going to a flea market? It was just SOSO. Let's go, Robbins. Let's go and have a look. Seeing the parade slowly walk in, Jiang Hai waved at Robbins and motioned for him to join the crowd. Since they were here to have fun, naturally it would be fun to join the crowd. "I won't go. I'll drive directly to the parking lot by the sea. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease leaving it here." However, when he heard Jiang Hai's words, Robbins shook his head. He was not at ease with the F-750. Although in the eyes of others, this car was just a good pickup truck, in his view, it was only 1/3 of the ranch. It was hard for anyone who wasn't a cowboy to understand their love for cows, horses, and pickup trucks. Jiang Hai saw that he really didn't want to come, so he could only shrug his shoulders and then join the parade. In fact, the parade was just following the flow of people around. Many of the residents in the town knew Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai was really low-key. He hardly interacted with the residents of the town, so many people knew about him. However, there were only a dozen people who could talk to him. They were the owners and employees of the Italian restaurant, as well as the owners and employees of several supermarkets. That was all. So after he joined the crowd, although people didn't say anything, they didn't communicate with him. The people in the United States were actually not as lively as imagined. If you were a tourist or filming something, they would come over enthusiastically and share their joy with you. But for familiar strangers like Jiang Hai, they would still keep a distance, but Jiang Hai didn't care about this. He just moved from time to time in the crowd, but it didn't take long for him to be squeezed from the front to the middle of the parade. As soon as he reached the middle, he met an acquaintance, the mayor of Winthrop Town, Mayor Wallace, who has met Jiang Hai a few times. "Hey Jiang Hai, you also participated in the parade." Seeing Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace, who was holding a water tank at this time, said with a smile, "Hey Mr. Mayor, I caught a mountain lion last night and sent it to the town. I just saw you marching here, so I came to join in the fun." Hearing the voice of Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai also leaned over and explained the reason for his appearance here. "Oh, I heard about this from others. You are really amazing, you can catch a mountain lion alive. You know, that is our top predator here." Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Mayor Wallace also nodded. He also heard about it in the morning. "Mayor, what are you holding? Do you want me to help you?" Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. After all, he couldn't explain the specific situation of the mountain lion he caught, so he wisely changed the topic. Looking at the big fish tank in Mayor Wallace's arms, Jiang Hai asked with some surprise, "Hey, no, this fish tank can't be easily held by others. Only I, the mayor, can hold it. This is a gift for the sea god." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace said with a smile, "A gift for the sea god?" Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai looked inside with some surprise, because he remembered that Robbins and the others said that the gifts for the sea god were some meat and the like. What does this fish tank mean? With a curious mind, Jiang Hai stretched his head forward, and Mayor Wallace also cooperated with him to move forward, so that he could see more clearly. Chapter 271. Don't say the distance was too far. The aquarium tank was transparent, and Mayor Wallace was wearing blue clothes today, so Jiang Hai couldn't see it clearly. Now that he was closer, Jiang Hai discovered that there was something in the aquarium tank. This thing is mainly blue in color. It is only about 3 or 4 centimeters long, and there are white lines on its body. It looked like a blue and white stripe with 6 huge flower beds growing on its body. It looked really beautiful and mysterious. Subconsciously, Jiang Hai stretched out his hand and wanted to touch this thing. However, Jiang Hai's hand just stretched out, and he was stopped by Mayor Wallace. Sorry, I really haven't seen this little thing. It looks really beautiful. If you don't look carefully, you will really ignore this little thing, but this thing looks really good. It's not that I don't want you to touch it, but this thing is highly poisonous. They eat jellyfish as food, and there are many kinds of jellyfish toxins in their body. If you are poisoned by it, it is almost impossible to live because no one knows what kind of poison you are poisoned with. Looking at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace said seriously. He remembered that Jiang Hai has a fishing ground. This kind of dangerous creature, although rare in the United States coastal area, occasionally occurs. If you are stung, it will be troublesome. So powerful, what is this thing? A sea slug? When he heard Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was also shocked and withdrew his hand. It seems that the law of nature is really like that. Those who are good-looking are not to be trifled with. It is a kind of sea slug. This thing is called the blue dragon, also known as the sea swallow. Its scientific name is the Atlantic sea god slug. Hearing that Jiang Hai was quite interested in this thing, Mayor Wallace said to Jiang Hai while walking, "The origin of this creature's name is the name of the sea god Glaucos in ancient Greek mythology. Did someone say that the god of the sea in Greek mythology was not Poseidon? However, Poseidon was the emperor of the sea while Glaucus was just a sea god. There was a difference in their levels. According to legend, Glaucus was originally an ordinary fisherman. But one day he found a kind of herb that could bring the dead back to life. Then, his spirit of seeking death was vaguely activated. After eating this herb, he turned into a merman, half human and half fish. He was divided into 3 forms. The left side was a human and the right side was a fish. Above him was the lower half of a human, below him was the lower half of a fish, and above him was the human head, and below him was the fish head." I digressed. In the end, he wasn't really a good story. The main myths and stories about him were his love triangle with Skylar the water fairy and Kerch the witch. However, in 1777, when European scientists discovered the Poseidon slug for the first time, they borrowed his name, Poseidon. Over the years, this kind of slug was found in many places, including Africa, Europe, Australia, and Mozambique. There were traces of this kind of slug, not only in the Atlantic Ocean, but also in the Pacific Ocean. However, people were used to calling it Poseidon in the Atlantic Ocean. Because this kind of creature could f*ck itself, mate and reproduce, the population was not small. Therefore, even though this kind of creature was very poisonous, many people were willing to keep it as pets because of its beautiful appearance. Of course, Winthrop Town didn't have so much money. Although Jiang Hai felt that this thing was quite beautiful, to be honest, he still preferred beasts. Therefore, he was just asking for fun. If he went to the sea in the future, he would avoid this thing when he saw it. He couldn't afford to provoke it. When Mayor Wallace explained the origin of this blue dragon, they had unknowingly walked from the town to the beach. At this time, a lot of people had gathered on the beach, including Luo Binsi, who drove here. In addition, there were many people gathered here. On the beach, there were a lot of small tents and tents. There were a lot of old goods inside. These were the things that would be used for trading in a while. Jiang Hai also glanced at them when he left. Most of them were abandoned appliances and the like. In the US, it was very troublesome to deal with old home appliances. You can't just throw them away. Every old home appliance had to be dismantled and sent to the processing plant. Some of them had to be recycled, and they even had to pay for it. This was very difficult for the lazy Americans to accept, but the punishment here was too heavy. If you were found to be littering, not only would you have to pay less, you might even go to jail. Therefore, in the United States, there were always a lot of old goods. Some people wouldn't throw away the old things after they replaced them with new ones. Because it was troublesome, most of them would be piled up at the door or in the warehouse. If a homeless person took a fancy to it, they could directly take it away. If it was newer, at least some old goods with some value would be sent to this kind of old goods market. Jiang Hai glanced around. There were a lot of things here. There were old appliances, refrigerators, televisions, washing machines, air conditioners, water heaters, and so on. There were old game consoles and all kinds of things. There were PS, PDAs, Xbox, and even the legendary Hongbai. There were old clothes, down jackets, even fur coats, some cloth, small ornaments, old books, old cups, old computers, and so on. It was almost like a department store. As long as you wanted to buy something, you could find it here. However, the premise was that these things were worthless and shabby. While Jiang Hai was looking here, Mayor Wallace had already walked to the front of the stage. After reciting a verse loudly, he poured the fish tank in his hand into the sea. The blue dragon that was caught also swam into the sea. With the cheers of the crowd, the ceremony was over. What was left was time to exchange information. Jiang Hai also told Rabinsi at the first time and plunged into the old goods market. However, Jiang Hai wouldn't let his stomach suffer. Before visiting this old goods market, he specially bought a taco. He ate it while walking and looking at the various things around him. For Jiang Hai, he actually didn't lack anything. Although Moses Adams was recently filing taxes for Jiang Hai, he didn't have any income since he took over the fishery last October. He only paid. If he didn't pay, it meant that the national and state taxes didn't exist. After all, taxes could only be deducted if there was income. If there was no income, then there was no tax to be deducted. Jiang Hai's gold coins were privately traded and were not included in the tax. Of course, if he took the initiative to report it, then the American government would be very happy. However, if the American government was happy, then the British government might have problems. After all, the gold coins that Jiang Hai salvaged were British gold coins, so there were many things in between. Jiang Hai wasn't stupid. He didn't have to pay taxes. He didn't have to pay sales tax or income tax. The only thing he had to pay was the local tax. However, because he took over in October, he only had to pay for half a year. Also, because Jiang Hai raised cattle, which was considered to stimulate local development, this tax would be reduced a little. Jiang Hai hired more than 20 people. More than 10 of them were locals, so the local tax would be discounted. In addition, he hired 9 special people, so the tax would be reduced a little more. Altogether, according to the calculations of the accountant that Moses Adams found, Jiang Hai only had to pay $1,723,446. $7 this year. Moreover, after the tax filing, he would return $50 to Jiang Hai to buy pasture and fish food. Although $1 million wasn't a small amount, it wasn't much compared to the $4 million that Jiang Hai had calculated back then. So, after paying this amount, Jiang Hai still had a lot of money left. It was enough for him to buy whatever he wanted. At this moment, he was wandering around just to see if there was anything interesting. However, after looking around, Jiang Hai wasn't interested in many things. He wasn't interested in old home appliances, game consoles, electric motors, fishing nets, clothes, and the like. What he was really interested in were some handicrafts and books. The so-called handicrafts were mainly wood carvings. These things were said to have been carved by the Native Americans. In fact, Jiang Hai had seen the Iroquois carving them. After they were passed down, they were indeed fun to collect. Jiang Hai picked some good-looking ones such as carved eagles, deer, mountain lions, and so on. He bought more than 10 carvings in total. These things could be put in his house. When he looked at them normally, they would give off a very stylish feeling. Just as Jiang Hai put away these wood carvings and was about to leave, he suddenly heard a shout. A treasure map. Come and look at a treasure map. A treasure map left behind by real pirates. Looking in the direction of the voice, Jiang Hai saw that the person hawking there was a big man. This big man looked to be more than 2 meters tall and had a big beard. At this moment, he was waving a piece of cloth made of cowhide. Jiang Hai had seen this guy before. He was also a fisherman. When he went to sell fish, Jiang Hai had met him a few times, but they hadn't communicated. Hearing his words now, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. In fact, ever since he got those gold coins last time, Jiang Hai had been a little interested in these treasures. However, he wasn't sure where the ships were. The sea was huge and it wasn't easy to find them. Secondly, Jiang Hai felt that he didn't have the ability to protect himself in the sea. If he encountered a sea monster or something like that, he would be done for. However, being afraid didn't mean that he wasn't interested. Now that he heard that there was a treasure map, Jiang Hai slowly came over. When he saw Jiang Hai coming over, the big man couldn't help but stop hawking and look at Jiang Hai with a smile. Since these sea maps were not real, they were meaningless to him. But when he heard this man's words, Jiang Hai, who was about to leave, stopped temporarily. But this time, before the two men finished speaking, a voice suddenly came from behind Jiang Hai, because it's too deep. Jiang Hai looked back and unexpectedly found an acquaintance, Bob George, the owner of the horse farm when Jiang Hai bought the horse. Compared with this old gentleman, Jiang Hai was more familiar with his daughter, Delia, who was following behind him. Hello, Jiang, I heard that you recently made a lot of money at the New York Beef Show. Seeing Jiang Hai turn his head, Bob George came forward and hugged Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Compared with the last time, this time he was obviously more enthusiastic than the last time. After all, no one would refuse a billionaire, and a billionaire who has proven his friendship. Since there is this relationship, he naturally has to seize it. Hello, Mr. George, how have you been? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him, "Haha, still the same." Seeing that Jiang Hai still remembered him, Bob George also said with a smile. And behind him, Delia was also looking at Jiang Hai curiously. In fact, to be honest, Delia didn't have a good or bad impression of Jiang Hai. From the beginning she met Jiang Hai, she was more curious about Asians. But later, when she learned that he had good ball skills, she also wanted to contact him, but she called Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai never called or sent a text message, so the little girl quickly forgot about Jiang Hai. This year she was about to enter college. Although the college entrance examination in the United States was not as difficult as the one in China, she still had to take the exam. She didn't consider the school's recommendation because she was not a good person when she was in school. Although she didn't change boyfriends more frequently than she changed clothes as the captain of the cheerleading team, she naturally changed boyfriends several times, and her reputation in school was naturally not very good. And for the formal exam, she felt that if she took the dance exam she might get a good score, but if she took the cultural exam she had the urge to die. She definitely couldn't go to college, community college was more likely, so she was going to find a job in advance. Going home to help her father take care of the horse farm was not what she wanted. Now, if she could get in touch with the billionaire Jiang Hai, it might be an opportunity. At this time, looking at the enthusiastic look of Jiang Hai and her father, she pretended to be a lady behind their backs. "You just said that his sea maps are real but they can't be fished out because it's too deep?" No matter what Delia thought at this time, Jiang Hai had finished exchanging pleasantries with her father. In fact, the two were not very familiar with each other, so the so-called exchanging pleasantries was just a few words. Compared to chatting with the old man, Jiang Hai wanted to know the story of these sea maps more. Hearing Jiang Hai ask about this, Bob George couldn't help but smile and say, "This guy's grandfather was the first European to come to the American continent, and he is indeed the descendant of a pirate. You know what happened to Juneflower? His grandfather was indeed sent here because of pirates. The sea maps he brought are 90% real, and until his father's generation he used these sea maps to make a fortune." In fact, this matter was not a secret in Winthrop and many people knew about it. The man's father had once used these charts to exchange for a certain amount of money with some high-ranking officials and nobles. There were indeed some very valuable sunken ships in these charts, which had brought his father a lot of money. But unfortunately his father was a drunkard and gambler, and later got addicted to drugs, and the money he exchanged for was all used up. In the end, when the man was 12 years old, he died in a car accident, and his father only left behind these sunken ships that were confirmed to be unsalvageable after being sold, because these sunken ships were really too deep. Using some submarines to explore, these sunken ships were basically about 8,000 meters below sea level, and even more than 10,000 meters below sea level. With the current level of the world, it was very troublesome to fish up a ship of about 5,000 meters. For example, the United Kingdom, with the whole country's strength at most, they could only fish up a ship of 4.8 kilometers, which is about 4,800 meters deep. 8,000 meters was really something that could be fished up, and it would not cost as much money. After all, not all sunken ships were called South China Sea No. 1, even if these ships were pirate ships. But not all pirate ships were rich. Pirates also needed to fight. Even if there were some valuable things on the main ship, secondary ship, and so on, it would be enough to salvage them, but this money was clearly not enough to salvage them. Hearing Bob George's words, the big man opposite him smiled a little awkwardly. It was true and he had nothing to refute, but his words made Jiang Hai feel a little moved. Others could not enter the deep sea because of the water pressure, but he did not care. He was not afraid of water pressure and he did not need to breathe, so he did not care about going into the water. The only thing he needed to worry about was his safety. But even if he could not use it now, it did not mean that he could not use it in the future. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai suddenly turned his head and said to the man, "I want one of each of your sea maps." "One of each? What do you want these things for? Even if you want to collect them, you should want some authentic ones. These are clearly printed." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bob George was a little confused. He had said everything he wanted to say. Did he think he was lying to him? Otherwise, why would there be such a big reaction? One of each? "Oh, I just feel that if I put these sea maps on my ship, then take some photos and send them back to China, it would be very interesting." "Name a price, one of each of these, how much?" Hearing Bob George's words, Jiang Hai smiled and said indifferently. He did not need these maps, but the treasures sleeping in the sea were very useful. "Well, the hobbies of rich people are always different from ours. Haha, if you have time, remember to come to my horse farm. I recently got a lot of good horses. Seeing that Jiang Hai did not listen to him, Bob George felt offended, so he did not say much. After saying a few words to Jiang Hai politely, he left with his daughter. At this time, Jiang Hai did not have the leisure to care what the old man was thinking. He was still looking at the man in front of him. One of each, how much? Taking out his wallet, Jiang Hai looked at him with a serious face and said word by word. Hey brother, 17C maps, 1 Franklin, all yours. Hearing Jiang Hai say it again, the man reacted and immediately picked up one of each from the stall, then handed it to Jiang Hai and said excitedly. Jiang Hai did not refuse. He took the 17C maps in his hand and gave him $100 each. Jiang Hai took these things back to Robbins. Now he could not wait to study these C maps. Chapter 273. Hey boss, what did you buy? Back in the parking lot, Jiang Hai saw Robbins Garcia smoking a cigarette from a distance. When he saw Jiang Hai coming over, Robbins Garcia stood up and said with a smile. 9 out of 10 American cowboys were heavy smokers. They were different from seafarers. Seafarers were very bored except for fishing and dealing with stormy weather, so they all liked to drink, especially hard liquor that could get them drunk. But cowboys were different. They couldn't drink too much because they had to let the cows out to graze on time every morning, clean the cow sheet and watch the cows, so although they were willing to drink, they were more willing to drink beer that was hard to get drunk. Compared to the boredom of seafarers, they were also bored when they were herding cows, but their eyes couldn't leave the cows, so most cowboys liked to smoke, but they didn't smoke cigarettes with filters. Because of this, it was very troublesome to throw a cigarette butt. Naturally, it was not allowed to throw a cigarette butt in the pasture. A small breeze would turn this cigarette butt into a time bomb. Therefore these cowboys prefer to smoke pipes. Don't think that tobacco is cheap. In fact, the tobacco in the pipe is not as expensive as the box of cigarettes sold outside. Especially Robbins and the others, Jiang Hai gives them the highest salary among the cowboys. So the tobacco they bought was also quite good. After smoking, they poured the remaining ash in the pipe into a leather bag they carried with them so that they could clean it up. Look, I got some C maps. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai raised the stack of papers in his hand. Oh damn Walter, you dare to cheat my boss. Let's go boss, I'll get justice for you. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but frown. Just like Bob George, Robbins Garcia was also an old man in this town. Naturally, he had some understanding of the guy who sold the C maps. If he was just deceiving a foreigner, probably no one would care. However, he was deceiving his boss. That was unacceptable. I know that these ships can't be salvaged because they're too deep. Someone has already told me that. I'm just going to buy these sea charts and take some photos in my ship. Don't be so angry. As soon as he heard that Luo Binsi was going to find that person, Jiang Hai immediately stopped him and said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi frowned but didn't say anything. Since Jiang Hai and that guy were willing to fight, he couldn't say anything and could only nod helplessly. After that, the two of them got into the car and headed towards Jiang Hai's manor. On the way back, Jiang Hai kept looking at his sea map. These 17 sea maps were all distributed in the Atlantic Ocean. 3 of the sea maps were in the North Pole, 6 in Europe, 3 in the Gulf of Mexico, and 5 in the Caribbean Sea. Jiang Hai wouldn't go to the North Pole for the time being. First, it was too far. Second, it was too cold. He didn't have the equipment to sail in the North Pole. Jiang Hai didn't want to go to Europe. After all, there were too many things to do in Europe. Especially in these sea maps, the original owner of the sunken ship may have some trouble. Because in the special era of the Middle Ages, pirates were actually more of a country's naval forces. These pirates had official backing. They robbed the ships of all countries, but secretly they could pay some tribute to other countries to get protection. For example, the famous British started as a pirate. After all, before the British, the real dominators of the sea were Spain, the Netherlands, and other countries. The empire where the sun never sets slowly rose under such a situation. Spain and other countries were famous for being shameless. Generally, as long as the ship was related to these countries, they wouldn't let it go. Even if Jiang Hai didn't salvage the ship, it would be troublesome if these countries found out about it when he was selling it. Then, only the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea were left. Looking at these sea maps, Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously cracked open. He now had the idea of going there to play. It was just a matter of time. After all, he had money now and he didn't have anything to do recently. It was good to go out to play. He had to admit that sometimes Jiang Hai was an impulsive person. Once he thought of something, he wanted to do it. Now that he wanted to go to the tropics to search for treasures, his heart was beating fast. He was really a little excited. However, he knew that it wouldn't be easy to go there. First of all, if he was alone, he wouldn't even be able to sail his boat. Therefore, he needed some sailors who knew how to talk. Secondly, there was the issue of safety along the way. After all, this was considered a circle along the east coast. He had to be careful. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about it, the car had returned to Jiang Hai's manor. After entering the gate, Jiang Hai's car stopped in front of the villa. As soon as he got out of the car, little Huang and Xiao Bai, who were playing outside the villa, ran over. Maybe they heard the dog barking. Delina and Marian also came out of their house. After patting the dog's head, Jiang Hai walked into the villa first. He looked around and found that Qi Li and the others weren't there. Where are they? Did they leave? Looking at Delina and Marian behind him, Jiang Hai asked curiously. Pierre Walton went to the winery and Selena Gomez went to the beach. As for Keely, who claimed to be your wife, she went to the cowshed. Jiang, is that woman really your wife? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina looked at Jiang Hai with her big eyes full of curiosity. Well, yes, but we don't have any feelings for each other. Anyway, I'll tell you about it. Hearing Delina's question, Jiang Hai also felt that his daughter should have the right to know about his marriage situation, so he sat on the sofa. Delina and Marian sat on the left and right of Jiang Hai, listening to Jiang Hai's story. At this time, the four women were having a lot of fun. Yesterday, Aphrodite and the others played all day, so they naturally had to work today to take care of the grapevines. After learning about this matter, Prawalton, who was originally staring at Selena Gomez, took the initiative to go to the winery and work with these beauties there. Of course, rather than saying that she was working, it was better to say that she was a hindrance, even though Prawalton was a real rich man. She didn't drink red wine unless it was the best. She also had some understanding of how red wine was brewed. However, she didn't know much about taking care of the grapevines. Although Aphrodite and the others were a little annoyed with her, they couldn't speak and could only endure it. Fortunately, it was all within their tolerable range. As for Selena Gomez, who had finally gotten rid of Prawalton, she went to the beach alone. Although she had only been here for a day yesterday, to be honest, she already liked Jiang Hai's beach. The gentle breeze was really comfortable, and the quality of the sand was also excellent. Especially when swimming, she could see colorful corals when snorkeling. The natural environment was very well protected, and it wasn't just the natural environment. Jiang Hai's beach even had Wi-Fi, which made her very happy. Here she enjoyed the sea breeze, drank drinks and played games. When she was tired, she would go to the sea to see the fish. When she was hungry, she would ride the four-wheeled motorcycle back to the villa to rest and eat. This kind of life was too beautiful. As for Qi Li and her little assistant, they were near the cowshed, listening to Big Mouth Philip introduce Jiang Hai's cowshed. Philip didn't know the relationship between Qi Li and Jiang Hai, so he thought this woman was a person who came to buy cows. Naturally, he praised the cows he raised endlessly. Of course, what he said was also the truth. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Jiang Hai's cows were the best in the world. Except for the fact that they weren't well known, they beat all of their kind in seconds. Since they woke up in the morning and had breakfast, Qi Li and her assistant had been staying here. Although in the beginning, because of the smell, they almost fainted from the stench, but after going to the wind and adapting to it, they felt that it was acceptable. This was Jiang Hai's cows. If it were anyone else, they would have fainted long ago. I didn't expect Jiang Hai to be so extravagant. The value of this manor and this herd of cows is almost comparable to our company. After getting a general understanding of the situation, Qi Li and her assistant went to a small slope on the lawn to rest. In front of them were Jiang Hai's more than 10,000 cows. Looking at the cows eating the grass was really spectacular. At this time, the assistant said to Qi Li with some lingering fear in her heart. Originally, this little assistant really looked down on Jiang Hai and thought that Jiang Hai wasn't worthy of their President Qi. But in the past 6 months, a lot of things really happened. The person she looked down on the most in the past seemed to have become someone she needed to look up to in an instant. Yes, the total value of these cows is about 3 billion. If Jiang Hai sells all the cows, the money he earns should be higher than the total output of our company. And don't forget, it's only been 6 months. Jiang Hai can't raise any more cows in the future. 1 wave of 3 billion, 10 waves of 30 billion, 1 wave of 300 billion. Tiske, this is really a place that can lay golden eggs. Looking at the grassland in front of her, Qi Li's eyes were like candles. I really didn't know that our son-in-law had such ability before. The assistant said helplessly. Yes, this Jiang Hai, I can't see through him more and more. I'm now interested in him as a person and his cows. Chapter 274. Qi Group is not considered a large conglomerate in China. After all, many companies are moving towards China, and there are lots of companies with high market values in China. Look at the Forbes list. All the banks in China are listed at the top of the list. Apart from these public companies, let's just talk about Tencent, Alibaba, Chanda, and so on. Their market value was easily tens of billions of dollars, and the founders who owned a lot of shares naturally had a high share of the shares. There was no telling how much they made every year, but they were definitely worth at least $18 billion in US dollars. The Qi Group's main business projects in the country were real estate and technology projects. Real estate was the foundation of Qi Li's father's business. He was originally a businessman. Later, when he had some money, he started from real estate speculation. Then he developed a residential area outside the third ring road of the capital. He used more than 10 years to turn from a contractor to a tycoon. Then he raised funds, went public, and established the Qi Group. As for the technology projects, most of them are venture capital and angel funds. Of course, the returns are also good. After decades of development by Qi Li's father, Qi Group's market value is 17.2 billion renminbi when Qi Li's father was at his peak. The Qi family owns 47.3% of the shares, and it is not an exaggeration to say that Qi Group is a family business. But after Qi Li's father died, the shares dropped to 8.1 billion renminbi, and more than half of the company's assets disappeared. In the past year, with Qi Li's help, Qi Group's assets returned to 16.2 billion renminbi. Although it is still far from its peak, it is not considered a first-tier conglomerate in Bing City, let alone in Beijing. After all, doing business is like sailing against the current. If you do not move forward, you will fall behind. In fact, Qi Li did not tell Jiang Hai that the real estate business in China is not doing well. The prices of the houses in the city have not dropped, and there is no need to worry about selling them. But it is very difficult to develop them. If the houses are too far away from the city, there will be no profits even if they develop them. This is because the houses are not selling well now. So now, Qi Li was forced to change her style. In the past year, she had put more energy into business and technology investments. The returns were quite good. Now, Qi Enterprise was mainly relying on these things to advance. But these things were not real. Technology was like virtual currency. No matter how high it was, if it burst one day it would be over. Qi Li, who had lived in the US for a period of time, was very clear about the networking and IT businesses. These businesses could make money quickly but go bankrupt even faster. For example, there was a factory in the United States that specialized in producing mobile phone screens. Later they signed a supply contract with Apple. Instantly, the company's stock price rose from a few dollars to dozens of dollars. At its peak, it even rose to hundreds of dollars. This company instantly entered the eyes of the public. However, before this company could make money, the company had already started to make money. Apple's new products did not use the screens produced by this company. Then this company went bankrupt immediately. So, Qi Li was very clear about these things. Investing money in these things will bring a lot of returns. But if it is not done well, it is easy to fail miserably. This is something she absolutely does not want to see. Compared to these superficial things, she valued the business more. In other words, if there is something in the business, it will make people feel more assured. Among all the businesses, the easiest way to make money was selling clothes. But Qi Enterprise will not deal with ordinary small brands. As for the big brands, they have their own fashion stores and do not need Qi Enterprise to act as their agent. Clothes are not available. Recently, the country is changing the price of housing and they can't do well. Even if they want to act as an agent for cars, they do not have the ability to do so. Then only food is left. It is said that food is the most important thing for people. Before coming to Jiang Hai's place, Qi Li had already considered whether she should get involved in the food and beverage industry. Because of the recent policies in the country, high-end hotels cannot sell alcohol and so on. However, there was still a market for some high-end Western restaurants, especially when ordinary people were earning more and more. A stylish restaurant is indeed a good place to make money. At the same time, Qi Enterprise is actually in the food and beverage industry. At the same time, she can make money and attack them at the same time to avenge her father. This is a good way to kill two birds with one stone. However, the catering business was not something that could be done as and when it came to official matters, it was easy for them to settle it. The Qi family had been in Beijing for so many years and could be considered to have deep roots. It was also easy for them to solve the problem of the shops. After all, their company had a lot of shops in their hands. But it is a little troublesome to find the origin of the raw materials. It is very difficult to sell domestic products at a high price now. And the foreign products are basically divided up by the big food and beverage companies. It is not so easy to find new ones now. So before coming out this time, Qili has also been thinking about this problem, but there is no solution. She came to Jiang Hai's place purely to relieve her boredom. At the same time, she made a deal with Jiang Hai and told him about her and Jiang Hai. But she accidentally found that Jiang Hai's beef is the best in the world. Originally, she just wanted to help Jiang Hai and help him get more money from Prawalton. That is why she came to learn about Jiang Hai's beef. This is also a kind of goodwill to him. After all, Jiang Hai's beef is raised in the East Coast. It is a little troublesome to transport it back. But as she got to know more, she found that Jiang Hai's beef is indeed the best. And Jiang Hai is also raising fish, not only cod but also other fish, even salmon and lobsters. If these fish are transported back to the country, her restaurant will be very successful. Then, she estimated that her restaurant would definitely be able to make a name for itself. That was what she was most excited about. But when she thought about the price of Jiang Hai's beef, she can't help but hesitate. It is too expensive. If the shipping cost was included, a pound of steak would cost almost 3,000 renminbi. Adding the cost of water, electricity, taxes, labor, and so on, she would not even be able to recoup the cost of a half-pound steak if she did not sell it for more than 2,000 renminbi. But 2,000 yuan for a steak, although the taste is guaranteed, how many people are willing to spend this money to eat it? This is also the most troublesome thing for her now, but she is really reluctant to give up. And most importantly, Jiang Hai doesn't kill the cows. There are only about 12,000 bulls. Now that 2,000 bulls have been sold, there are still 10,000 bulls. If she doesn't want them, then she can be sure that Prawalton will not give up these bulls. If she wants them again, she will have to wait another year. I have a headache. Rubbing her temples, Qili murmured in a low voice. The assistant who has been sitting next to her naturally knows what project her boss is following up on recently. In fact, in her opinion, Jiang Hai's food is really delicious. She has been traveling extensively with Qili in China. It can be said that she had seen and eaten all kinds of delicacies, but when she came to Jiang Hai's side, she suddenly found that the things she used to think were delicious tasted wrong. Not to mention the steak. After all, it was the steak that the young master of Walmart had taken a fancy to. Just the fish, lobster, and abalones have a taste that she has never eaten before. The fresh and sweet taste of the deep sea and cold water really made her a little overwhelmed. It is really delicious. If she can feel this way, then the foodies in China will not be bad. It can be said that as long as these things are sent back to China, it will be no problem to sell them at a high price. However, she also knows what Qili is worried about. The transportation is too expensive, too far, and too high. It is really a bit speechless. They sat on the lawn for the whole afternoon. When the sun set in the west and Philemon and Belle were about to go back with their cattle, the two women came back to their senses. I have decided I want to give it a try. Looking at the blue sky in the distance, Qili seemed to be talking to her assistant beside her, but also seemed to be talking to herself. She nodded with a serious face. Her voice was not loud, but it was unusually steady. But the price. Hearing Qili say that she wants to give it a try, the assistant is a little worried. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. If we let go of this opportunity, then we can only wait for next year. If Jiang Hai's beef is made famous by Walmart, even if there is some affection between Jiang Hai and me, it will not be easy to get a certain share. The most important thing is that when the time comes, we will not be the only family to sell this kind of beef in the country. Standing up, Qili casually patted the grass and leaves on her butt, and her eyes flashed with a trace of firmness. President Qi, as long as it is your decision, I will faithfully carry it out. Seeing that Qili has made up her mind, the assistant naturally knew that this is the time to show her determination, so she stood up and said with a serious face. Then the two returned to Jiang Hai's villa. When they returned to the villa, they found that Prawalton and Selena Gomez had already returned. Of course, the most important thing was Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai had already prepared dinner. In Jiang Hai's manner, there was never a shortage of delicious food. Tonight he made dinner. Steak was naturally the main dish. In addition to steak, there was also a pot of beef stew. Seafood was naturally indispensable. 10 fried cod sticks, a large bowl of cheddar soup, Arctic sweet shrimp, braised abalone. Although there was no lobster from yesterday because Jiang Hai did not have time to catch it today, these dishes were naturally very sumptuous. On the other side, Qili's assistant, after sitting at the table, did not stop using her mobile phone. It seemed that she was also showing off in her circle of friends. However, in addition to her, it seemed that the atmosphere at the dinner table today was even more strange. Chapter 275. Jiang Hai, I have something to tell you. After a dull dinner, Prawalton didn't mention the beef to Jiang Hai today, and Jiang Hai didn't take the initiative to talk about it. But after Prawalton left, Jiang Hai was preparing to clean up the remaining plates and bowls when Chi Li walked into the kitchen and looked at Jiang Hai and said, "What's the matter?" While cleaning up the remaining dishes, Jiang Hai asked Chi Li, "Can you leave some of your beef for me?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi Li said with some embarrassment. Last night she was still bargaining with Jiang Hai, but she didn't expect that one day later she changed her mind. She changed from a person who wanted to make money for Jiang Hai to a person who wants to make money for Jiang Hai. The change is really big. "Okay, you can take as much as you want, but how much can you eat? Is it for your mother? I remember that the beef I gave your mother last time was the best." Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai thought she was embarrassed to take some back. Although he and Chi Li have a relationship, Jiang Hai is not so stingy that he can't even bear to part with some beef, so he said without raising his head, "No, not a small amount and not for me to eat. You also know that our Chi group is mainly in the real estate business, but recently the domestic real estate business has not been good, so we changed our business to investing in the electronics industry. But this thing is not a real business after all. There are too many bubbles in it and I am a little worried, so I recently had an idea, and that is to invest in the restaurant industry." Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi Li began to talk. She is indeed a good businessman and can also be said to be a good politician. When she began to talk, her endless enthusiasm was indeed like a female robber. The trace of hesitation just now has completely disappeared at this time, and she began to talk to Jiang Hai about her philosophy. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's hands, which were originally busy, stopped and looked at her with some surprise. "You mean you want to buy beef from me? To be honest, I don't think your choice is right. After all, the price of my beef is a little, oh no, it is very high and it is really difficult for ordinary people to accept." Looking at Chi Li in front of him, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Business is business, feelings are feelings, and Jiang Hai and Chi Li don't have any feelings for each other. Originally their identities were more like enemies. It was good enough that he didn't raise the price, and it was impossible for her to let him get a discount. Of course I know that. The price is not lower than yours. I bought it at the same price as Pratt Walton. You don't think that I spent so much effort to open a Western restaurant just to cater to the middle and low-end consumers, do you? My target has been the rich since the beginning. For the average consumer, 2,000 renminbi for a steak is hard to accept. But for the rich or those who like to show off, it's not particularly expensive." Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi Li also stared at him. From the beginning, the so-called pattern between the two was different. After all, Jiang Hai was just a loser in China. Although now he is abroad and has become a rich man, in fact he is more like a loser. Some people say that a rich man can't be rich for more than 3 generations because the people who are really rich for more than 3 generations are the family. Although Chi Li is not from a family and has not been rich for more than 3 generations, it doesn't prevent her from fixing her eyes on those families. Such a price, except for those families, only the nouveau riche who likes to pretend can accept it. Seeing Chi Li so serious, Jiang Hai didn't say anything and thought for a moment. "Since you have decided, I can give you a share of 1,000 head, but the transportation fee is not included in the meat. You need to rent a warehouse in Boston and find a way to get the meat back. It's up to you whether you want to go by air or by sea." Now he can still squeeze out 1,000 head of beef, and it doesn't matter if he gives it to Chi Li. After all, Prawalton hasn't ordered how many head of beef she has. In fact, Jiang Hai understands why Prawalton is so calm and not in a hurry. In fact, it is very simple. Jiang Hai's beef is too expensive. Now in the United States, there are only a few people who can afford to buy all his beef. And Jiang Hai just participated in the New York State Beef Cattle Show in the east of the United States, and his name hasn't become famous yet. There won't be a large number of suppliers, so she has a certain opportunity. She has been playing these 2 days and didn't talk to Jiang Hai about the price. It's not that she doesn't want to talk to him, but she is waiting for Jiang Hai to be unable to hold back. Although in terms of the final transaction price she would definitely not let Jiang Hai suffer a loss, but cooperation was similar to talking about a partner. There is always one person who is strong and the other person who is weak. Prawalton wants to be the strong one. Now Jiang Hai gave 1,000 head of beef to Chi Li, which is actually a hint to Prawalton that his beef can be sold. If you really don't talk about the price, then it will really have nothing to do with her. 1,000 head of beef? That's great, but we may not be able to buy so many at once. Hearing Jiang Hai give her 1,000 head of beef so quickly, Chi Li, who has prepared a lot of excuses, is stunned first and then she is ecstatic. Originally, she thought that it wouldn't be easy to get some beef from Jiang Hai's hands. But unexpectedly, Jiang Hai is more decisive than she thought. 1,000 head of beef is enough to deal with the Western restaurant she is going to open. If the quality of the beef is really the same as the beef she has eaten in the past 2 days, it will be difficult for her restaurant not to be popular. Seeing Qili agree, Jiang Hai also waved his hand. As long as the price is not a problem, it is not a problem. This is not a problem. Beef will not taste good after it is frozen. If you want to eat it, you have to eat it cold. The contract is for half a year. Within half a year, you can slaughter it many times and you can decide the number of times. In the end, you will be done with 1,000 head of beef. For beef, many slaughterhouses slaughtered beef in batches and then froze it. However, although frozen beef wouldn't spoil, it definitely wouldn't taste as good as fresh beef. Really good beef was fresh and cold, just like some expensive fish. If it was fresh and cold, it wouldn't be a problem even if it was kept for 10 days or half a month. It will be the same as when it is alive, but if it is cold, it must be frozen immediately if it is not eaten, otherwise it will spoil. Jiang Hai's beef is the same. After killing the beef here, it must be immediately put on ice and then sent back to China. It will take 2 days to go back and forth, and it is just right to divide it into half a month to slaughter it. No problem, we can sign the contract. Seeing Jiang Hai agree, Qili's eyes lit up. After half a year of growth, the bulls in Jiang Hai's restaurant have basically grown to their largest state, which is 750 kilograms. According to the meat yield of 65%, it is nearly 1,000 kilograms. Out of the 1,000 kilograms, half a kilogram of steak can be made, which is only 2,000 yuan in total. Besides, in a restaurant there is more than just steak. There are about 1,200 servings. If she opens a restaurant, she will open more than one. If all her restaurants in the food and beverage industry couldn't consume 5,000 pounds of beef a day, then there was no point in her opening a restaurant. Not to mention impacting the family's original market. Even in the capital's food and beverage industry, it probably wouldn't make any waves. Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai thought for a while and nodded. Okay, it's a deal. To be honest, he didn't really want to sell the beef cattle to Qili. After all, 1,000 bulls is not a small amount. Jiang Hai's beef cattle can be sold for more than 100,000 yuan per head, and 1,000 of them will be more than 100 million yuan. If it was converted into RMB, it would be 700 to 800 million. This was a huge amount of pressure for Qili. However, Qili is obviously ready to deal with the pressure. After Jiang Hai agreed, she quickly went upstairs and contacted the people in her company to discuss the purchase of Jiang Hai's beef. First of all, they need a transport plane. They can't afford it, but they can rent it. Secondly, it is the problem of the price. However, it has nothing to do with Qili, and the professionals will discuss it. The next morning, Qili came to Jiang Hai with the contract she made overnight. Prawalton is the first one to be stunned. Just as Jiang Hai thought, Prawalton came with the idea that the goods are there, but she didn't expect Qili to interfere. Jiang, this is different from the number you told me. How can you sell 1,000 bulls to her without permission? Looking at the contract Qili brought over, Prawalton's face is gloomy. She has prepared the money this time. She was waiting for Jiang Hai to give up so that she can sign a contract with him. However, she didn't expect that someone would come out of nowhere. First of all, you're mistaken about one thing. This is my cow, not yours. Secondly, this is my thing. Naturally, I can sell it to whoever I want. You haven't said that you want it, and you haven't said that you don't want it. I can't possibly refuse someone who comes to me with real money just to wait for you. Jiang Hai glanced at Prawalton casually and signed his name on the contract Qili brought over. Jiang Hai also showed this contract to Moses Adams, and the obligations of both parties are clearly stated in it. Seeing Jiang Hai give away 1,000 bulls just like that, Prawalton is really anxious this time. Okay, 1,000 bulls it is. I'll take the rest. Prawalton said word by word as she slammed her hands on the table in front of Jiang Hai. It is obvious that she is not in a good mood now. Don't you want to see the bulls? We haven't talked about the price yet. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some surprise. He really doesn't understand this woman. Prawalton just smiled after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Does Jiang Hai really think that he is playing these days? Too naive. Chapter 276. Tut 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 tut. The sound of a motor could be heard in the waters of the Jiang Hai fishing ground. At this time, a boat was like an arrow that had been released from a bow, quickly cutting through the waves and advancing into the depths of the sea. At this moment, Jiang Hai was sitting in the pilot's seat. He wore a pair of sunglasses and looked into the distance while enjoying the sea breeze. At this moment, there were no humans by his side, only some animals. Boom 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 boom. Although it was not her first time out at sea, Xiaobai was still very afraid of the ocean. In fact, dogs were afraid of heights and water. Of course, dogs could swim, but that did not mean that they liked water. There were some dogs that liked water, but most of them were like Xiaobai. They didn't like water. That's enough, your voice is louder than the engine. Jiang Hai patted Little White's head and said with a smile. But sometimes, fear wasn't something that could be understood just by talking about it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xiaobai looked at Jiang Hai pitifully. It tried its best not to cry out, but it still stayed far away from the boat. If water splashed over, it would run away immediately. Looking at it, it continued to lie lazily in the distance. However, its raised eyes and ears meant that it didn't like water either. Unlike them, Dai Teeth and Qiuqiu seemed to like this place very much. Qiuqiu was currently standing at the bow of the ship, shedding its feathers. Although it was not as majestic as an adult bald eagle, it was somewhat similar. Occasionally it would try to spread its wings, but its claws would not loosen no matter what. Jiang Hai was not worried about this. The bald-headed sea eagle's growth cycle was very long. Generally speaking, it would take 4 months for the hatchling to grow into a young bird. The young birds had to be taught for another 3 months before they could fly and leave Rome to live alone. Although Jiang Hai's Qiuqiu was about the same age, it was congenitally deficient when it was young. Although it had Jiang Hai's qi as its bones to make up for its injuries, it still couldn't fly yet. It needed to be trained slowly, but at this moment, it had shown its yearning for the sky, so Jiang Hai didn't have to worry about it. As for the other one that wasn't afraid of water, it was Bucktooth. This guy was currently sitting in front of the dashboard of Jiang Hai's cabin. He was watching Jiang Hai drive the ship while eating the grass that Daliana had given him before they set sail. He was very calm. Looking at the appearance of his pets, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He had been busy these past few days. 10 days have passed since Qi Li and the others arrived. The first day was the day they arrived. The second day was the Poseidon ceremony. On the third day, after Jiang Hai and Qi Li signed a contract, Prawalton and Jiang Hai signed a contract on the fourth day. After all the money was deducted, Jiang Hai was finally relieved. Every year when it was time to file taxes, people in the United States felt that there was a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. In the United States, tax evasion was definitely the most serious crime. Most importantly, the people in the United States almost always relied on you to voluntarily file your taxes. If your tax return was not correct, they would do something to you. Look at how many big shots, rich people, and important politicians in the United States were arrested. 9 out of 10 of the biggest crimes were related to tax issues. For the people in the United States, the Internal Revenue Service was much more terrifying than the FBI and the CIA. Jiang Hai hadn't immigrated to the United States yet, and he didn't have the intention to do so. However, after filing his taxes, he was relieved. After receiving the tax report and the bill of exchange, Jiang Hai's mood improved a lot. The money from selling the beef was counted as this year's income. Although he would have to pay a large sum of money next year, it was always good to make money. Therefore, he prepared to take his family out to sea to have fun. Unfortunately, Daliana and Marion were not willing to go. So in the end, Jiang Hai brought the 4 of them out to enjoy the sea breeze. It seemed like his mood was lifted a little. After sailing for a long time, Jiang Hai stopped the boat in the middle of the coral reef in the lesser land. He turned off the engine and let the current carry the boat back and forth on the sea. Jiang Hai didn't go fishing or diving. Instead, he took off his underwear and laid down on the boat. He called Little White and Little Yellow to his side. While basking in the sun and drinking cold beer, he rubbed the heads of the 2 guys with his hands. This kind of life was very comfortable. However, while Jiang Hai was enjoying the sun, Xiao Huang, who had been lying next to him, suddenly stood up. His pair of eyes stared at the sea behind him. Feeling Huang Jingjing's expression, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sit up and look behind him. Following his gaze, he saw a fluffy cylindrical thing slowly floating over from a distance. What is that? Trash? Looking at the thing swaying back and forth with the current, Jiang Hai muttered in a low voice. Taking off his sunglasses, Jiang Hai looked at the floating thing. As it floated closer and closer, Jiang Hai also saw the appearance of this thing. Indeed, this thing is a fluffy cylindrical creature. Its head is white, but its body is black. At this time, this little guy seems to be sleeping. Its eyes are closed, swaying on the sea. He has to admit that it's really cute. Jiang Hai heard about this creature many times, but it's the first time he saw it. It's a sea otter. Looking at the little guy floating closer and closer to the boat, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand up and slowly move closer. Although he has always heard of sea otters, this is the first time Jiang Hai has seen one. In fact, sea otters are the same as walruses and sea lions. They belong to the marine mammals. Although they have claws that allow them to live on land, they don't. However, they seem to have retired the ability to live on land. Instead, they are very powerful underwater. At this time in front of Jiang Hai, it should be a male sea otter. Although it's sleeping and its body is curled up, it's still very big. It's almost a meter long. Its small nose and big front teeth surprised Dai Teeth. Seeing Jiang Hai stand up, Dai Teeth also crawled to Jiang Hai's side and looked at this guy. It's the first time I've seen it and it looks so interesting. I'll catch you as a souvenir. Jiang Hai is not a person who is fond of old things. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't like these fluffy animals. As soon as he saw this sea otter, Jiang Hai had the heart to keep it as a pet. Mountain lions are not easy to play with, and the procedures are very troublesome, but sea otters are not a problem. No, just before Jiang Hai's hand touched the sea otter may have felt something in its sleep and instantly woke up. Its small eyes, which are the size of mung beans, looked at Jiang Hai in amazement, then it instantly dived to the bottom of the sea. He had to admit that sea otters sometimes had really quick reactions. The moment he saw it open its eyes, Zhang Zian was shocked. Jiang Hai's hand has already reached out, wanting to catch this little guy, but this little guy didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to catch it. Its body was as slippery as an oily cloth, floating on the surface of the water. But once it entered the water, it was the best acceleration device. It didn't give Jiang Hai time to react at all. The sea otter had already disappeared in front of Jiang Hai, leaving only a black shadow in the water. Little guy, I won't let you run away. Seeing the sea otter enter the water, Jiang Hai didn't hold back and plunged down. He is very familiar with the waters in front of his house. Big Idiot has already swept the area. There is no danger, so he is the dragon of the sea. Chapter 277. Splash. As soon as he entered the water, Jiang Hai's eyes swept to his side. At a glance, he saw the sea otter that was rushing forward quickly. At that moment, Jiang Hai also chased in its direction without saying a word. The sea otter is indeed an expert underwater, but unfortunately this guy's swimming speed isn't that fast. It's just that his reflexes are quick. When this guy enters the water, he's fast. In the blink of an eye, he's already 3 to 5 body lengths away from Jiang Hai. If it took advantage of this gap, it wouldn't be difficult to get rid of Jiang Hai. Although this guy could only swim at a maximum speed of 15 kilometers per hour in the sea, it wouldn't be a problem to surpass Jiang Hai. What's more, this guy was much more agile under the sea than Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai wasn't easy to provoke. Since he was determined to catch this little thing, he wouldn't let it go easily. The first thing Jiang Hai did was to kick the boat behind him. Using the recoil force of the boat, Jiang Hai shot forward like a torpedo and instantly chased after the sea otter. At this time, the sea otter looked back at Jiang Hai. It was really scared out of its wits. At this moment, it was also a little flustered. It sped up and swam forward. Jiang Hai didn't catch it in a straight line, but he didn't care. He just hung behind it and swam quickly in that direction. One must know that the sea otter was also a mammal, and it also needed to breathe. When there was no gap between Jiang Hai and it, as long as it went up to breathe, then Jiang Hai could catch it. This was also Jiang Hai's confidence in himself. However, the sea otter was also quite strong. It knew that Jiang Hai was catching it, but it didn't swim upstream. It still desperately swam downstream. The sea otter's deepest diving depth was only about 50 meters. After a period of training, 50 meters was not a problem for normal people, let alone Jiang Hai. Just like this, a man and an otter swam straight from the sea surface to the bottom of the sea. Who? Originally, Jiang Hai didn't care about where the sea otter went. However, when he saw the reef on the seabed, he couldn't help but curse. He didn't pay attention to it. Reefs and corals were different. Corals were multicolored. Even corals with only one color were grayish-white. Especially in the clear sea water like Jiang Hai's sea, corals could be seen from far away. However, the reefs weren't that easy to see. At this time, there was only a small group of reefs. If the sea otter escaped into the group, then catching it would be very troublesome. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but speed up. His big hand instantly grabbed the sea otter. However, the sea otter was very smart. It also sped up and entered the group of reefs. Looking at the scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his fist in annoyance. The reef was very dangerous because there were a lot of aquatic animals living here. For example, eels, sea snakes, or some poisonous things. But since he was already here, Jiang Hai couldn't go back empty-handed. So he thought for a while and slowly swam into the group of reefs. But just as he swam over, he saw a black and white sea snake swimming towards the distance. This sea snake is called the ringed sea snake, a very common sea snake. Sea snakes actually don't have many species. There are only 16 genera and 50 species. They evolved from the ancient cobra. Compared to their relatives on land, sea snakes are less of a threat to humans. This was because sea snakes rarely attack humans unless you stepped on them or took the initiative to grab them. Otherwise, this snake is very docile. In the sea, it also has many natural enemies. Almost all large carnivores will eat this thing, so these guys don't have any sense of security. Although Jianghai has twice the physical fitness limit of humans, it's still better to be careful under the sea. These sea snakes left, Jianghai also breathed a sigh of relief. This is a good thing for him. Slowly touching the reef, Jianghai swam in little by little. At this time, he didn't notice that the sea otter actually didn't go deep into the reef group just now. It just hit on the reef near the door. For it, the reef group is actually quite dangerous. After Jianghai entered, it quietly left, leaving only Jianghai here. Reefs are actually similar to coral reefs. Many of them are wreckage left by marine life, but compared to the colorful coral reefs, reefs are not so beautiful. They are basically brown. Looking underwater, especially at the bottom of the sea, if the light is not too good, it is really a bit scary. At this time, Jianghai's place is already about 45 meters under the sea. The sunlight hits the bottom of the sea, so there will always be some reduction. Looking up, he can see his boat, but looking around, it's a bit dark. Fortunately, Jianghai is now a skilled and bold person. Plus, he is relatively close to the sea surface, so he still calmly moved forward. Soon he found an enemy, a sea eel. In the sea, this thing was famous for being stupid. It was ugly and had problems with its brain. Whenever a creature passed by, it would attack regardless of whether it was able to defeat it or not. Since it wasn't poisonous, Jianghai wasn't afraid of it at all. But now Jianghai's main focus is to find the sea otter. It's not worthwhile to find trouble with it, so Jianghai bypassed it. But just after bypassing the reef, in Jianghai's eyes, he saw a group of green, blue, red, orange, yellow, a mess of colors in the crevices of the reef in the distance. They were quietly staying there, and outside of them, there were some transparent thread-like objects. Seeing this thing, Jianghai couldn't help but be stunned. He had only heard of this kind of creature before, but he really hadn't seen it before. At least he didn't see it in his own coral group. Parrotfish. However, looking at his indifferent look, the police had no choice but to take him back first. However, Jianghai could take the girls back to change their clothes first. After all, it would be shameful to go to the police station dressed like this. After all, this was not a case of anti-pornography and illegal activities, but a civil lawsuit case. As for the 5 people over there, they were sent to the hospital first, and Jianghai went to the police station first. However, when they were recording the statements, the police were a little helpless because it seemed that Jianghai and the others were the ones in the right. In order to ensure the safety of the guests, the hotel had installed surveillance cameras on the entire beach. They were very clear about the movements in the surveillance cameras. It was clear that the injured person called Qin Feng had grabbed a woman's wrist first, and then he was slapped. When this person called Jianghai went to check, he was also attacked by his subordinates first, and then they fought. These people were not as skilled as others, so there was nothing they could do. It was the same as the situation in China. When 2 groups of people fought, it was useless to scold who first unless there were racial words. However, both sides were Chinese, so it was clearly impossible. So, they could only see who made the first move. If it was the other party who made the first move, then there was nothing to say. Although Jianghai's side did not beat these people lightly, they were basically all lightly injured. The ones with the most serious injuries were the first and third people. One had a broken shoulder, one had a broken nose, and the others only had a concussion and lost teeth. According to the rules of the people in the United States, these people deserved it. If the gangsters were beaten up, they would not get a single cent. As for Jianghai, at most it was excessive self-defense. He would go to the community and do 50 hours of community service. However, the problem was that both sides were Wuxia people, so they had to inform Wuxia's embassy in the United States. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.